Hello, you lovely cubs. This is Dragon Lord here, back again with another part of What If Giyu was Tanjiro's older brother. Now, you guys loved this series, so I'm gonna obviously continue it. Who would I be to cancel this series? Now, that sounds kinda cringe, but let's just go with it. Anyway, like and subscribe if you're new around here. It truly helps me out and it shows that you want more of these kind of videos. Today's video will have a like goal of 50 likes. I know you guys can crush that easily. I believe in you guys. Anyway, join the Discord if you haven't already, and let's get into the what if.
I'm up now, 20,000 on a bus down, I'm on my way, I'm going up now, and I ain't never gonna touchdown. I ain't never gonna touchdown. No, I ain't never gonna touchdown.
Tanjiro carried his two siblings back up the mountain, laying them both to rest against their house wall. He'd proceed to bury his family members, and after he had buried them, all he would pray. 30 minutes would pass and Giyu would wake up. Looking over, he'd see his brother fiddle with one of their charcoal baskets. He was cleaning it out and making it suitable for Nezuko to sit in. Giyu quickly looked around, afraid of his sister being dead, but as he looked to his right, she was there, laying against him. He'd sigh in relief as he got up to give a prayer to his family. After that, he'd help Tanjiro out with the basket. They'd depart shortly after Nezuko woke up. They'd pass by fields with workers, small villages, farmhouses, and so on, until they arrived at the foot of a mountain. It was starting to become night and the two brothers had gotten a warning about monsters on the small mountain, yet they didn't mind and just went on. Arriving at a small shrine, Tanjiro would smell blood. The three of them, with Nezuko now being out of her box, would rush up to the shrine. What they saw horrified Tanjiro. A demon was feasting on humans. It scared the young boy, yet his older brother grabbed his axe, took a breath, and swung at the demon. His leg still hurt, so his attack missed, but it got the demon on edge. It made a quick judgment and went after Tanjiro, determining that he was the weakest. It proceeded to kick Tanjiro and started fighting him. Giyu, being unable to move because of the strain on his leg, would yell at Nezuko. It would wake her up as she processed to kick the demon's head off. Tanjiro would take this chance to kick the demon's body off of him, and he took a breath, and copied his brother. Hinokami Kagura. Dance, he'd say as he slashed vertically at the demon's body, hitting its neck, and slashing straight through it. The demon, not being able to regenerate itself, started to disintegrate. "Are you alright?" Nezuko would say, approaching her brother. She had woken up some more and was able to talk, although her speech was equal to that of a 7-year-old. "Yeah, I'm okay," Tanjiro would say, smiling, reaffirming his sister. Tanjiro and Giyu would bury the bodies of the monks and give their prayers. "Are you two the Kamado brothers?" a voice would say from behind them. Turning around, they'd see an old man with a red Tengu mask on. "Yes, we are. Who might you be?" Giyu would say, distrustful. However, Tanjiro looked at his brother and smiled. The man before them was human. This made Giyu lower his guard a bit. "My name is Sakonji Urokodaki. I'll be your teacher," he'd say as he turned around. "Follow me," he said as he started running. The two brothers would start following, with Tanjiro carrying Nezuko on his back. Giyu was a bit slower, but he managed to keep up without straining himself too much. They'd arrive at Urokodaki's house where Tanjiro would pet Nezuko in a futon so she could rest. "Tanjiro, I will be making you do a test to see if you are worthy of my time," Sakonji said as he gestured to the boy to follow. Giyu, however, got told to stay and rest. Tanjiro would follow Urokodaki up the mountain as they reached the top. "Get down the mountain before daybreak, then I will accept you as my student." He disappeared shortly after saying that. Tanjiro took a breath and started making his way down the mountain, dodging all the traps. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the mountain, Urokodaki would arrive back at his house, entering it. "Why'd you make my brother take that test?" Gyu would ask curiously. "Well, you were able to impress my student, who is a Hashira, and you dispatched that demon," Urokodaki would say, sitting down to tend to Gyu's leg. "Well, I didn't dispatch that demon. Tanjiro was the one who did that. Despite how he looks, I've never been able to beat him when it comes to our father's Hinokami Kagura dance. His endurance is something to admire," Gyu would say with a smirk. Urokodaki was a bit surprised, but shortly after, Tanjiro entered through the door. Not even 20 minutes had passed since Urokodaki came back, and there stood Tanjiro, unharmed. "I'll take you both as my students," Urokodaki would say with a smile. Tanjiro's training started, with Gyu watching from the sidelines for now as his leg was still too hurt. Tanjiro would get the basics of swordsmanship taught to him. He already knew a lot from the mercenaries that trained them, but this basically perfected his normal swordsmanship. A week would pass and Gyu would join, catching up to his younger brother in only 1 day. Their training really started now, as they had to run down the mountain and avoid traps, spar with Urokodaki, have stand-up training, basic muscle training, and so on. This would be their training schedule for 2 months. After that, the two got taught water breathing. Both of them were able to learn the actual breathing technique in a week. They both had already experienced the breathing technique in the form of Hinokami Kagura, and with Urokodaki's assistance, they learned all the things that they skipped out on. Mastering the breathing technique was a breeze for the both of them, as it wasn't even close to putting the same strain on their body as the Hinokami Kagura. Yet Tanjiro had a bit more difficulty than Gyu, and it seemed like Gyu was a prodigy with water breathing. They were taught the forms, which took both of them 4 months to master. They'd use each other as a way to master the forms, watching each other's faults and correcting them. Urokodaki had decided it was time. He assigned both of them a rock. Gyu's rock was large, but Tanjiro's was even larger. "Why is my rock larger than Gyu's?" Tanjiro would ask curiously. "You have a wall to climb over, and unless you climb over that wall, you won't make it as a slayer." Urokodaki would leave after saying that. The two brothers kept training together, and after about 6 months of training together, both brothers had completely deleted all their faults in water breathing, to the point where if they sparred, they were completely equal in form and technique. Of course, Gyu had a better physique than Tanjiro, and was able to overthrow his brother. Both brothers would slice at their rock today, with Urokodaki watching them. Gyu went first. He took a breath and rushed at the rock, slashing it clean through. Urokodaki stood impressed, saying that Gyu's rock was designed to never be slashed through. This gave Tanjiro some anxiety, but he resolved himself. He took a breath and rushed at the rock, perfectly slicing at it. But nothing happened. The boy would turn around to see Urokodaki leaving. His brother just smiled at him. "Don't worry, I'll take care of finding a cure for Nezuko." The next day, Gyu would set out for the final selection. Tanjiro thought about all the things that could have gone wrong, and then he just looked at his katana. His katana was this rusted sword. It wasn't an actual good Nichiren blade. They had prioritized Gyu's progress as he stood above Tanjiro right now, so Gyu took the actual Nichiren sword, and Tanjiro just trained with a very old spare that Urokodaki still had. Yet it was better than his axe, so he didn't really have much of a choice. Was it because of this rusted blade that he could not slice through the rock? What was going on? Meanwhile, at final selection, Gyu was able to kill all the demons relatively easily, until he met a big green mutant demon. The demon started to gloat about killing Urokodaki's students, remarking that the mask Gyu wore was the same one as the mask of that pink-haired boy and his sister. Gyu got confused, but the demon explained how he killed the girl and almost had the boy, but the daytime saved the boy. Gyu thought about it for a second, realizing he was talking about Sabito. He'd take a breath and blitz the demon, performing the first form of water breathing, water surface slash. However, Gyu only got through half of his neck before his blade got stuck. As he pulled his blade out, he tried to go for another blow, but the demon started attacking him constantly, giving Gyu no opening to attack. Shortly after, the demon would flee, fearing for its life. This pissed Gyu off, but he had to reserve his stamina for the rest of final selection. He was the only one who passed, as he got his Nichiren ore and Demon Slayer corpse outfit. He'd return home. There, a worried Urokodaki and Tanjiro welcomed him back. That night at Urokodaki's house, they feasted for his return. But Gyu had to bring something up. He asked about the massive green demon. Urokodaki sat in silence as he explained that Sabito lost his sister to that demon. He looked at Gyu and asked him if he took care of that demon. Gyu explained what had happened. Urokodaki continued to sit in silence and told Gyu that he did good. He explained to Gyu about blood demon arts and the upper and lower moons. Gyu took note of this. Tanjiro was there as well, but he was constantly imagining the demon that Gyu was talking about. It couldn't leave his mind. "Hey Tanjiro, I'll leave that demon up to you, alright?" he'd say with a smirk, looking at his younger brother. Tanjiro just nodded. 2 weeks would pass and the swordsmith would come by and give Gyu his sword. The swordsmith entered the house and showed his sword. "I made this blade for the Child of Water. Me, Haganezuka," the swordsmith would say, revealing the blade. Gyu would grip the blade and it would turn a nice blue color. Haganezuka was ecstatic to see this and thanked Gyu for the sight. A knock was heard at the door and Tanjiro walked in. "Wow, Gyu, you got your sword. Awesome," he'd say as he looked at Gyu's sword. Haganezuka jumped up and ran at Tanjiro full speed, grabbing the boy by his shoulders. "Boy, are you becoming a demon slayer too?" he'd ask with excitement in his voice. Yeah, that's the plan," Tanjiro would say, laughing. "If you pass the final selection, ask them to let me make your sword," he'd say excitedly. Tanjiro stood confused until Urokodaki spoke. He didn't say much, but he just said one thing. "You're a child of fire." Tanjiro was confused, but he remembered something his father said long ago. It wasn't until Haganezuka went into explanation that he finally linked some of it. Haganezuka explained why Gyu's sword turned blue, and the reason why he wanted to make Tanjiro's blade was because it would be red. Tanjiro thought about it and agreed. He came to a realization and ran up the mountain. The others followed him mainly because Gyu still wanted to tell him things, and Haganezuka wanted to talk more about the Nichiren sword he'd make for him. They'd follow Tanjiro to his rock. Tanjiro grabbed his Nichiren. Haganezuka looked at it and got mad at Urokodaki. The sword Tanjiro was using was a very old rusted Nichiren sword. Urokodaki only had 2 swords and Gyu had gotten the better out of the 2 as he showed the most potential with water breathing. Tanjiro, however, took a breath. The others looked on. He gripped his blade with all his strength and rushed at the rock. "Hinokami Kagura, dance!" he'd say as he unleashed a powerful vertical strike on the rock. The spectators who looked on were shocked, especially Gyu, who realized that Tanjiro had somehow made the Hinokami Kagura even stronger. But Haganezuka was shocked because of Tanjiro's sword. For a second he could have sworn that it had turned crimson red before he swung downward. On the boulder a chunk had been cut off. It was nowhere near cutting through the boulder, but it was impressive nonetheless. Tanjiro's sword, however, broke. The pressure had caused the sword to break. Haganezuka determined himself. When he would make Tanjiro's sword, he'd make it as high quality as he possibly could. Tanjiro would be saddened that he broke Urokodaki's sword. As he looked over to his sensei, he apologized. However, Urokodaki pointed out that Tanjiro's scar had changed. It had become red and pointy. "I see now. You both have Demon Slayer marks," Urokodaki would say, looking at both of his students. He grabbed his students and brought them in for a hug. After that, Gyu would hand Tanjiro his training sword. Tanjiro was thankful to his brother and cried. "Water breathing doesn't suit you as much as it does me. Master our father's dance and use it when water breathing can't help you," Gyu would say, leaving for his first mission right after. Tanjiro took this to heart and started training again. This time his goal was mastering the Hinokami Kagura. This would take him a year. In that year he'd constantly work on his body. His physical strength had to be strong enough to keep up with the Hinokami Kagura, and he got there with the help of Urokodaki. Urokodaki initially didn't want to help Tanjiro, but realizing Tanjiro basically had to completely create and master a breathing style from a dance was gonna be hard on his own, so Urokodaki would help him with physical training and bare minimum things like that. The fevers he got from using the breathing technique weren't as bad, and he got over them pretty quickly. He had already gotten used to the breathing technique through the years of him using it with his brother, and it wasn't taxing on his body. The hardest part was figuring out how to use the forms and using them consecutively. 8 months into his year-long training, he was able to use up to 8 forms consecutively out of the 12, and then he'd need a short break. This was quite a step up, and if he only used the breathing technique without consecutively performing the forms, he'd be able to handle it for around 4 hours without being too exhausted. He was already able to perform the dance for approximately 10 to 12 hours, but the forms were of course more intense, so that time was divided by 3. Tanjiro had a goal in his mind: the mutated demon. Of course, he didn't know how strong the demon was, so he bounced it off of the people he knew. Sabito, who was easily able to beat him, and his brother Giyu, who wasn't able to beat the demon either, although he had trained so hard. Tanjiro had formed an image in his mind of this demon, an image that was many times stronger than the demon actually was. 10 months into his training, Urokodaki stopped helping Tanjiro as he determined that Tanjiro could handle the training on his own now. And Tanjiro did continue his training, perfecting the forms and fighting the demon that he imagined. To him, the demon was a massive wall he could never overcome, but he didn't give up. Around this time, Tanjiro started seeing children around him that would encourage him to fight the demon, one of which was a small girl with bluish hair and blue eyes. She introduced herself as Makomo, and Tanjiro realized that she was Sabito's younger sister who had died. He looked her in the eyes and spoke. "I promise I will get revenge for you, so you may rest in peace." After he said that, Makomo smiled and walked back into the woods. Finally, a full year of Tanjiro's training, and he had now perfected all 12 forms, to the point where he thought there was no movement wasted. His so-called Demon Slayer mark had also evolved only a slight bit, and it had grown. When he fought the demon this time, he decapitated it. Urokodaki just so happened to come up to the mountain that day and watch Tanjiro train. The boy looked at his sensei and spoke. "I beat him, sensei. I did it." A smile formed on his face, and Urokodaki couldn't help but smile either. Tanjiro was gonna be the one that beat the mutant demon, the one that had plagued him so many years and taken so many of his students' lives. "I'll let you take the final selection now. You will have to depart in 2 days," Urokodaki said with a smile. "Not yet," Tanjiro said with a serious look. He had turned around and looked at the massive boulder that was in front of him. Urokodaki looked at Tanjiro. He had given Tanjiro a boulder that nobody should be able to cut, because he didn't want such a young man to become a demon slayer. Yet Tanjiro resolved himself. He took a breath and brought his sword up. He rushed at the boulder, and this time Urokodaki saw it as well. Tanjiro's sword had turned crimson red. Tanjiro cleanly cut through the boulder as if it was butter, and when his sword was barely touching the ground, it turned back to its light blue hue. All of a sudden, a crow cawed. Looking over there was a crow standing on a branch. This was a Kasugai crow. It came down and landed on Urokodaki's shoulder. "Giyu Kamado has been qualified to become a Hashira. Congratulations to his family and sensei for this accomplishment." The crow would leave shortly after. Tanjiro and Urokodaki descended down the mountain, where Tanjiro was given a feast. After all, in 2 days he had to take the final selection. Those 2 days had passed, and Tanjiro set out. Urokodaki thanked him for taking up the task of beating the mutant, and Tanjiro just smiled and said, "Obviously, I promised Makomo as well." As he left, Urokodaki had a tear fall down his mask, and he prayed for Tanjiro's safe return. And that is where this part ends. I hope you lovely cubs enjoyed today's part. I put a lot of time into it, and I hope you guys do truly love it. Again, 50 likes for the next part. It's already written out, so the moment you guys hit 50 likes, I will start working on it by recording it and then editing it. Anyway, like and subscribe if you're new around here. Anyway, comment down below what you thought of it. I do like your guys' feedback. And without any further ado, my name's the Dragon Lord, and I'm signing out.
Tell me a story.
There was once a pale man with dark hair who was very lonely.
Why was it lonely?
All things must meet this man, so they shunned him.
Did he chase them all?
He took an axe and split himself in two, right down the middle.
So he would always have a friend.
So he would always